Rain hammered the marble steps of the Cole estate as if the sky itself had a grudge. Security lights cut through the downpour, turning every drop into a sharp blade of white. At the top of the steps, an old woman in a faded wrapper and a navy cardigan held a cracked leather handbag to her chest. Her gray scarf was tied tight, her chin lifted. Her name was Mama Grace, and she had lived long enough to see her son become a billionaire. Tonight, she was watching him become something else. "Escort her out," Darius Cole said, voice steady like an executive order. His suit was black. His shoes were quiet. His jaw was set. Cameras near the entrance blinked red. A few neighbors had their phones pointed through the fence, the blue glow of screens reflecting on wet asphalt. Vanessa, his wife, stood slightly behind him in a cream dress and a thin gold anklet. Her arms were folded. "We have given you options," she said. "A comfortable apartment at the lake. You refused. This is necessary." Mama Grace did not look at Vanessa. She looked at Darius the way mothers look at their children when they are trying not to cry. "This is my house," she said softly. "The house I prayed over, the house your father dreamed of. I named the hibiscus by the kitchen window after you. If the rain touches that flower, I always check your forehead." Darius avoided her eyes. "The deed is in my name, Ma, and it's time for order. You can't keep arguing with staff and changing the menus. We have brand dinners here, investors, journalists. You create confusion." "Confusion?" Mama Grace's voice did not rise. "Because I asked the chef to cook jollof for your board members? Because I greet your drivers by their names? Because I refuse to sit silent when you speak to people like they are beneath you?" He said nothing. He turned to the head of security, a tall man with a shaved head and a black rain jacket. "Jamal, make sure she has a ride to the apartment. Pack her things." Jamal hesitated. He had grown up on the same block where Mama Grace once sold Puff Puff from an oil-scorched pan. He knew the way she slipped extra pieces into kids' paper bags when their coins were short. But orders were orders. Two guards stepped forward with a large umbrella. Mama Grace did not move. "Darius," she said, "do not let your money build a house with no room for your mother's chair." Vanessa exhaled sharply. "This is emotional blackmail." Mama Grace turned to her at last. "My daughter, a home that eats its elders will soon chew its children." Thunder rolled across the open lawn. A black SUV idled at the curb, wipers fighting the storm. The guards took Mama Grace by the elbows with careful hands. She did not resist. As they led her down the steps, the leather strap of her bag snapped, spilling a few things onto the wet stone. A small Bible, a carved wooden comb, a tin key box, and a cheap phone with a cracked screen. Jamal bent quickly, scooped up the items, and put them back. His eyes met hers for a second. She gave him a steady nod. At the bottom of the steps, near the kitchen side of the house, a potted hibiscus leaned heavy with rain, its red petals trembling. Mama Grace stopped. "Leave me one moment," she said. The guards looked to Darius. He made a small, impatient gesture. She went to the hibiscus, slid her fingers into the soil, and touched something that was not dirt, a small square corner of a sealed plastic pouch. She pressed the soil back, patted the top flat, and wiped her hands on her cardigan. Vanessa stepped closer to Darius, whispering, "Did you see that?" "It's just her dramatics," he said, but his jaw muscles flexed. Mama Grace turned one last time. Rain slicked her scarf to her forehead. "You are still my son," she said. "No matter how large your gates are. Gates do not stop rain." Then, with the guards at her side, she walked toward the SUV. As the car pulled away, a clap of thunder shook the hedges. The gate slid shut behind them, red lights blinking like eyes growing tired. Inside, silence pressed against the polished walls. A portrait of Darius and Vanessa hung above the staircase, all clean lines and stuck smiles. Darius stood looking at it longer than he meant to. Vanessa took his arm. "We did the right thing," she said. "Boundaries. We're not villains." "Of course," he said softly. "Of course." But the house felt colder. Water tapped the kitchen windows like fingers. He went to his office with the dark wood and the view of the city. The skyline wore the storm like a shawl. He had meetings in the morning, city officials, a hotel ribbon cutting, press hands waiting for his quotes. He had won big contracts last quarter. His face was on magazine covers, the visionary of West Midtown, the boy from the blocks who broke into the world with real estate and data centers and deals most men only read about. You do not build a kingdom by being afraid to shut a door, he told himself. You do not let nostalgia run the calendar. His phone buzzed. A message from Victor, his CFO. Call me when you can, not urgent, quick update on the Midtown acquisition. Darius put the phone face down. He didn't want numbers right now. He wanted quiet. He poured a drink. The glass chimed lightly against the table. Thunder sighed again overhead. Down the hill from the estate, the SUV stopped under an overhang beside a small church with a peeling blue door. Mama Grace stepped out, the rain reduced to a thin mist here. The church sat between a corner store and a barbershop where boys argued about football. A woman in a plastic rain bonnet opened the church door and pulled Mama Grace inside like a daughter hugging a mother who had traveled too long. "Ah, Mama Grace," the woman said. "What is this night?" "Only weather," Mama Grace answered. She touched the carved wooden comb in her bag. "Please, can I use the back room to make a call?" She sat on a folding chair, placed the cheap phone on the table and dialed a number that lived in her head like a song. It rang twice. A man's voice, calm and careful, came through. "This is Attorney Adeyemi." "It is me," she said. "Grace." He was quiet for a breath. "I told you this day might come," he said. "Is your son firm in his decision?" "He has closed his gate," she said. "When a child closes the gate on his mother, the wind will judge the hinges." "The papers we prepared, are they safe?" "Yes." "Then we must be steady. The sunrise clause is strict. If your signature is not withdrawn by midnight tonight, it takes full effect. I want to make sure you are ready for the noise that will follow." "I have known noise since the market stalls," Mama Grace said. "What time is it now?" 10:20. She nodded to no one, even as her hands trembled. She slipped the tin key box out of her bag. Inside lay a thin gold key and a small flash drive sealed in plastic. The key had a number engraved on it, 17. The drive had one word written on masking tape: custodian. Across town, Darius stared at the rain stripes carving lines down his window. He remembered another rain, years ago, when he and his mother had stood under a broken awning near a bus stop, selling puff-puff and cold drinks to passers-by, laughing because the oil kept snapping like a bad temper, and the wind kept blowing the smell of frying dough down the street. He remembered how she counted their coins at night and used her calloused fingers to teach him the difference between a dollar that feeds you and a dollar that buys you shame. "Dream big," she used to say, "but don't let your bigness make small the hands that lifted you." He shook the memory away like a dog shaking off water. He was not a boy with flour on his cheek anymore. He was a man who built towers that made clouds look close. He checked the clock on his desk. 10:29. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor. Not a text, but a call. Darius let it ring, then picked up on the last vibration. "Victor?" "Boss," Victor said, voice too brisk. "Did you authorize a change to the family trust?" Darius frowned. "What?" "No. Because our bank's legal team just pinged me. Something about a custodian clause getting flagged by a third-party trustee. I've never heard of it. It references your mother by full name. It says if a certain condition is met by midnight tonight, controlling votes on Cole Urban Holdings temporarily shift to an external custodian for 90 days pending mediation." Darius sat up. "That's impossible. The family trust was settled years ago. I control it." Victor cleared his throat. "Apparently there's an older instrument attached to the same trust, a hidden clause. The bank says it predates the revisions after your IPO. It's sealed, but active." "How would it activate?" Darius asked, heat rising in his face. Victor hesitated. "It's triggered by the eviction of a founding family elder from a primary residence without due process or mutual consent." Lightning flicked. The office lights blinked once, twice, then steadied. Darius pushed back his chair so hard it skated an inch. "Who wrote that clause?" "Your late father's original attorney," Victor said. "Name on file, Adeyemi." Darius's breath tightened. He looked toward the kitchen in his mind, to the hibiscus wet with rain, to his mother's slow hand pushing soil back into the pot. He felt a thin thread of fear pull tight in his chest. "Fix it," he said. "Find a way. Call legal. Call the bank. Call anybody." "I'm on it," Victor said, "but you may need your mother's signature to halt it, and—" He paused. "There's another thing. If the clause triggers, an audit starts. Not just financial. A full review of governance, charity obligations, even treatment of household staff. It's comprehensive." Darius ended the call and stood very still. The rain had turned to a whisper. He could hear the house breathe. Down at the church, Mama Grace closed her phone and put the tin box back in her bag. She stood slowly, bones careful. She whispered a short prayer, the kind mothers whisper when they bind their fear to faith. Then she stepped outside under the overhang and looked up at the sky as if measuring the hours by the way the clouds moved. At the estate, Jamal walked the kitchen corridor, checking windows, feeling the night press at the glass. He paused by the hibiscus. Something pale peeked from the soil, a corner of plastic like the edge of a secret. He glanced toward the hall. No one. He reached out, brushed away a thin layer of wet dirt, and saw the black shape of a flash drive sealed tight. He swallowed, heart thumping. Behind him, Darius's footsteps came down the corridor, fast and heavy. Jamal snatched his hand back and stepped aside. Darius stopped at the pot, breath quick, eyes scanning the wet soil. For a second, all the power in his name felt thin as paper. "What did she put here?" he murmured. Outside, thunder rolled again, far off now, like drums beating at the edge of town. The clock in Darius's office ticked toward 10:43. At the church, Attorney Adeyemi slid into a pew, phone pressed to his ear, his voice a steady river. "Yes, clerk. File the notice. Mark it urgent. Effective at midnight if unchallenged." Mama Grace closed her eyes. Back at the estate, Vanessa called from the hallway, voice sharp with worry. "Darius, what's happening? Why is legal calling me about a trust?" Darius looked from the hibiscus to Vanessa, to Jamal, to the dark window glossed with rain. He opened his mouth to speak, and the house lights flickered again and went out, swallowing the mansion in a sudden, clean darkness. Darkness swallowed the mansion like the ocean closing over a ship. For a breath, no one moved. Then the emergency lights warmed to a dim amber thread along the baseboards, a soft glow that made the hallways feel like tunnels. "Generator should have kicked in immediately," Jamal said, already reaching for his radio. His voice was low but steady. "Control, status?" Static, then a reply from the guard room. "We're switching. Heavy surge on the line. Give us 60 seconds. Vanessa hugged her arms around herself. The cream dress that looked so effortless an hour ago now felt thin. "Darius, talk to me." Darius was staring at the hibiscus pot, the wet soil dark as a secret. The blackout had snapped something in his chest, the illusion that the house's perfect systems would always obey. He looked at Jamal. What did she bury here? Jamal weighed his words. He had seen the corner of plastic. He had grown up learning when to speak and when to swallow. "I don't know, sir," he said, though his heart beat a little faster. The house hummed low as the generator thudded on. Overhead lights returned in patches, flicking one by one like reluctant stars. The kitchen brightened, rain whispered against glass. The portrait above the stairs blinked back into shine. Darius crouched by the pot, the silk of his suit darkening at the knee. He pushed his fingers into the soil. Vanessa made a face. "Darius, please. Get a towel." He ignored her. His hand closed on smooth plastic. He pulled, and a sealed pouch rose from the dirt, slick with water. Inside, a thin flash drive, matte black, and a folded index card. He tore the pouch, set the drive in his palm, and unfolded the card with his thumb. 2 lines of careful handwriting. Key 17, custodian. Beneath it, a phone number he didn't recognize. He felt the same cold that storms lay on big cities, quiet and total. Vanessa read over his shoulder. "What does that even mean?" He stood abruptly. "It means my mother planned for tonight." In the church office, the clock ticked. Attorney Adeyemi, a small man with a broad forehead and a patient suit, placed a neat stack of papers on a folding table and lined up his blue ink pen. Mama Grace warmed her hands around a chipped mug of tea and watched the window streak with rain. "Madam Grace," he said gently, "I must remind you again. Once we file, the custodian has lawful authority for 90 days. You will not be able to withdraw without cause. The board will be notified. The banks will be notified. The city will hear. You will be named publicly as the initiator." "I was named publicly many things in the market," she said quietly. "Seller of good puff-puff. Woman who prays too much. Woman who gave free food to boys with fast mouths. I do not fear names." He smiled a little. "You should know. Your son is capable. He moves quickly. He will attempt to contain this." "If he moves quickly," she said, "then let him run a little, so he knows he has legs for more than climbing." Outside, a bus hissed along the wet street. Somewhere, a baby cried, then quieted. Adeyemi slid a document toward her. "This is the affirmation," he said. "It says you witnessed the condition that triggers the custodian clause, eviction of a founding elder without consent. You add the time. You sign. We file." She took the pen. Her hands trembled once, then stilled. "What time is it?" He checked his watch. 10:52. She wrote carefully. 10:35 p.m. She signed her name in slow strokes. Grace Cole. At the mansion, Darius strode toward his office, the pouch and the flash drive in his fist. Vanessa followed, heels tapping like questions. Jamal moved a step behind, caught between duty and memory. Darius's office was half glass and half gravitas. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked over a city still combing storms out of its hair. A shelf of awards glowed quietly. He grabbed a clean towel, wiped the dirt from his fingers, sat at his desk, and jacked the flash drive into the side of his laptop. His password field reflected in his face. He typed. The drive mounted as Custodian 17, a single video file and a locked folder. The video opened to a frame that made his breath catch. His father, Emmanuel Cole, sat on a plastic chair in a room with a standing fan and a metal cabinet. The image looked old, grain like fine sand, edges soft. He wore a white shirt with the sleeves rolled, a brown belt, and the kind of smile that taught patience. His eyes were the same steady dark as Darius's, but gentler. "Son," Emmanuel's voice filled the office in a quiet, steady baritone. "If you are seeing this, I am no longer there to tease you about your haircuts. You were always the boy who wanted to build tall. I prayed you would be the man who built wide." Darius's throat tightened. Vanessa moved closer, slowly, drawn by the ghost of a man she'd only known from framed pictures and the soft focus of funeral recordings. "I come from a line of people who believed a roof must be big enough for rain and for the neighbor who forgot an umbrella," Emmanuel continued. "So I left a clause in our foundation, not to punish, to protect. If in your rise you forget the chair your mother sits on, then a hand stronger than yours will hold the house while you remember." He paused, breathing a little heavier. "The custodian is not an enemy. Do not fight. Sit down, listen, make it right. If you do that, when the house returns to you, it will not be ashamed of you." The video ended. The screen returned to the folder view. The locked folder blinked like a calm eye. Vanessa whispered, "This is manipulation from the grave." Darius didn't answer. He clicked the locked folder. A password prompt appeared. 4 digits. He looked at the card again. Key 17. Custodian. He tried row 17. Wrong. He tried 1717. Wrong. 4 symbols only. "Birth year?" Vanessa offered. "Your father's?" Darius typed 1960. Wrong. He exhaled through his nose. He thought of the hibiscus. He thought of the tin box. He thought of the key. Gold with a number. He typed 007 again, then stopped. The folder was patient. Jamal shifted, his mind running on a different track. "Sir," he said slowly, "with respect, key 17 might not be a code. It might be a key, safety deposit, storage unit, something like that." "Where?" Jamal hesitated. Years ago, when he was a thin teenager hustling odd jobs and hoping trouble would forget his name, Mama Grace had asked him to help carry 2 heavy bags into a bank downtown. She had made him wait outside while she spoke to a clerk with a bun and a bright scarf. When she came out, she gave him a puff-puff from a small paper bag and said, "The sweetest things are often the simplest." He remembered the bank's brass numbers on the door. He remembered the way she looked relieved and tired at once. "The 12th Street branch of First Heritage," he said. "They have private boxes. Keyed. I think she rented one once." Darius looked at him. "At this hour?" "Night manager can open for legal requests," Jamal said. "If your attorney calls." Vanessa threw up her hands. "We're not chasing breadcrumbs like kids. Call Victor. Stop the claws." As if summoned, Darius's phone buzzed. Victor's text. "Bank is escalating. Possible temporary restraining order at 11:30 if filed. Counsel suggests you contact your mother. Without her, we're limited." "Give me the number," Darius said to Jamal, meaning the number on the card. Jamal read it out. Darius dialed. A calm voice answered, "Dayemi Chambers." "This is Darius Cole," he said, power braided into his tone by habit. "I want to speak to my mother." There was a short pause. Paper rustled. "Good evening, Mr. Cole," Adeyemi said with measured courtesy. "Your mother is with me. She is safe." "I don't care where she is," Darius said too fast. He reined it in. "Tell her this is unnecessary. We'll talk in the morning." "I'm afraid midnight arrives before morning," Adeyemi said. "If you wish to speak with her, you may come. We're at New Hope Baptist on Ashland. Back room." Darius's jaw worked. "I'll send a car." "She asked for you," Adeyemi said softly. "Not a car." Vanessa mouthed, "Don't go." He could read it on her face like a sign. Darius ended the call without promising anything. He looked at the flash drive, at his father's frozen smile on the screen, at the locked folder. Then he looked at Jamal. "Get the car." Vanessa stepped in front of him. "Darius, this is dramatic. You're playing into it. Let legal handle it." "Legal can't sign what only she can sign," he said. "And if this thing triggers, we'll spend 90 days explaining ourselves to men who enjoy making men like me kneel. I refuse." Vanessa's voice cooled. "So you run to your mother after throwing her out? That's your brand now?" He met her eyes. "My brand is doing what keeps this house standing." He brushed past her. In the church, Mama Grace stood, smoothing her cardigan with small, practical movements. "If he comes angry," she told Adeyemi, "do not shield me. Let the boy let out what's in his chest. Rain does not ask the roof if it can fall." Adeyemi gathered the papers into a neat stack, slid them into an envelope, and tucked a slim tablet into his case. "If he comes," he said, "I will step into the hall." Back at the estate, the gate intercom crackled. "Sir, there's someone at the gate," Control said. "Not security. 2 men in suits. One has a badge, looks like a court clerk. The other says he's from First Heritage Bank." Vanessa went pale. "At this time?" "Tell them to wait," Darius snapped. "No one comes in until I say." "Yes, sir." Jamal already had his jacket on. He moved with a soldier's efficiency, but his eyes strayed to the hibiscus, to the wet soil cuffed at the pot's rim. He felt the weight of a memory press on his shoulder. The day Mama Grace found him after his older brother was arrested, handed him a paper envelope with half a month's wages inside, and said, "Come sweep my front step for the next 2 weeks so you can tell your pride you earned it." In the driveway, the car idled under the portico, a dark animal ready to run. Rain had eased to a silver mist. The city beyond the gates was a necklace of blurred lights. "Sir," Control said again, voice tighter now. "The clerk is holding an envelope. He says emergency notice of injunction under protective elder clause. He says it applies tonight." Darius felt the world tilt a degree. He thought of headlines, of shareholders with faces like chess pieces, of rivals who would press send on saved drafts. He thought of a hibiscus named after him, red with rain. "Stall them," he said. "No signatures, no acknowledgments. We'll deal with it when I get back." He took one step toward the car. A sound cut through the night, small and clean, the click of a laptop unlocking. Jamal had moved to the desk as if to gather the flash drive and tuck it into a pouch for safekeeping, but now he was bent low, eyes on the screen. "Sir," he said, voice strange. "What?" Darius snapped, turning. "The folder," Jamal said, pointing at the laptop. It opened. Darius crossed the room. The locked folder no longer blinked. Its contents lay plain: a scanned deed, a trust amendment, and a single-page letter with the heading, Appointment of Temporary Custodian. He clicked the letter. It was short, as tight as a knot. Upon activation, it read, "The temporary custodian for Cole Urban Holdings is designated as the head of household security, as attested by the elder matriarch. Name at time of appointment, Jamal Okoye." The room went very quiet. Vanessa stared. Darius looked from the screen to Jamal, then back again, as if the words might rearrange themselves into a different name. Jamal's hand, still on the desk, had started to shake. Outside, at the gate, the court clerk lifted the envelope, tapped the seal once with 2 fingers, and looked straight into the camera lens. Inside, Darius opened his mouth, and the office door swung inward on its silent hinges as the butler hurried in, eyes wide. "Sir," he blurted, breathless, "your mother is here." The words dropped into the room like a stone into a well. For a second, no one breathed. "My mother is where?" Darius demanded, his voice cutting like glass. The butler swallowed hard, his white gloves damp with sweat. She's in the foyer, sir, with Attorney Adeyemi. They just arrived. I tried to stop them, but your mother said you would know she was coming." Vanessa's lips parted in shock. "Impossible. She was at that rundown church. How did she—" "She walked in with her head high," the butler whispered, eyes flicking to the floor. "The guards at the gate, they stepped aside." Jamal's heart pounded. Mama Grace here? He had seen her withstand market storms, rude customers, even neighborhood boys with too much bravado. But walking back into this mansion after being dragged out hours ago? That was different. That was a drumbeat only a mother could carry. Darius's jaw flexed. The flash drive was still in his hand, its faint weight heavy as stone. She thinks she can waltz back in here and wave papers at me? No, not in my house. But before he could take a step toward the foyer, a voice carried through the hallway, steady, measured, neither loud nor soft. "Darius." He froze. Everyone froze. Mama Grace stood in the doorway. The cardigan was still damp from the rain, but her scarf had been retied neatly. Beside her, Attorney Adeyemi held a slim folder and an envelope sealed with red wax. His shoes left small dark prints on the polished floor, but his posture was calm, almost ceremonial. "I told you," she said, eyes locked on her son. "Gates do not stop rain." Vanessa instinctively stepped closer to Darius, her hand gripping his arm. "Don't let her turn this into a scene. Tell security to remove them now." Darius didn't move. His father's voice from the video was still echoing in his head. "If you forget the chair your mother sits on—" "Why are you here?" he said finally, his tone low and dangerous. "To give you one last choice," Mama Grace said. "To sit as a son, not as a ruler." Adeyemi stepped forward, holding up the wax-sealed envelope. "Mr. Cole, this is a preliminary injunction and notice of activation of the custodian clause. You have until midnight to cooperate voluntarily. It is now 11:08 p.m. Vanessa gasped. "You can't just walk into a billionaire's home and—" Adeyemi interrupted gently. "Madam, this is not about wealth. It is about law and family." Darius's hands tightened on the desk. "And what if I don't sign? What if I tear that paper in half and throw you both out right now?" Mama Grace's eyes did not flinch. "Then the world will read tomorrow morning how a man worth billions lost control of his own house because he forgot the prayers that built it." Jamal shifted uncomfortably. His name was still glowing on the laptop screen as temporary custodian. He hadn't asked for it, hadn't wanted it, yet here it was. Authority wrapped around his shoulders like a heavy coat. Vanessa suddenly pointed at the screen. "Darius, look, that letter, this is outrageous. She made him the custodian?" Her eyes burned into Jamal. "A security guard? A street boy you dragged in to sweep floors? That's her plan?" Jamal lowered his head but said nothing. Inside, his stomach turned. He remembered Mama Grace's words years ago. "Sweep with honesty, and one day you'll be trusted with keys." Darius walked slowly around the desk, his shoes clicking against the marble. He stopped in front of his mother, close enough to see the faint wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. the calm in them that made him feel 12 years old again. "You humiliate me," he said through clenched teeth. "In front of my wife, my staff, my own house." Mama Grace reached into her bag and pulled out the small wooden comb. She held it up between them. "Do you remember this? When your hair was too stubborn, I used this. You would cry, but you always sat still because you trusted I would never hurt you. That trust built this house more than your contracts did." For a moment, silence. The sound of the rain easing outside, the faint hum of the generator, Vanessa's breathing sharp and fast. Then Darius spoke, his voice shaking despite himself. "What do you want from me?" "Not your money," Mama Grace said. "Not your empire. I want your respect, and your heart back where it belongs." Adeyemi laid the envelope gently on the desk. "Mr. Cole, if you acknowledge this clause with your mother's presence tonight, the custodianship will be symbolic only. She may withdraw the filing, and nothing will reach the banks. But if you refuse—" He let the sentence hang. Darius looked from the envelope to the flash drive, then to Jamal, whose name still glowed as custodian. He felt trapped between the walls of his own making. Finally, he reached for the envelope. His hand hovered, trembling. Vanessa's grip on his arm tightened. "Don't you dare, Darius. Don't let her control you." He closed his eyes. His father's voice again. "Sit down. Listen. Make it right." His fingers touched the envelope, and the front doors of the mansion slammed open with a crash, startling everyone. A voice rang out from the foyer. "Mr. Cole, you're needed outside immediately. The court clerk has police with him, and they're demanding entry under judicial order." The clock on the wall ticked, 11:12 p.m. Everyone turned, hearts pounding, as footsteps echoed closer. The storm outside had not ended. It had only shifted. The thunder outside rolled like drums of war as heavy boots echoed across the polished marble floor of the foyer. 2 uniformed officers entered, flanking a slim man in a gray suit who held an envelope high like a banner. His glasses were speckled with rain, but his voice was clear. "By order of Fulton County Superior Court," he announced, "this property and its occupants are subject to immediate review under the Elder Protection and Custodian Clause. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges." Vanessa clutched Darius's arm. "This is madness. You're not some street hustler to be ordered around in your own house. Throw them out, Darius." But Darius's mind was racing. He saw the headlines already. Billionaire son expels mother, faces custodianship probe. He imagined stock prices falling, rivals celebrating, contracts slipping through his fingers. His empire could be undone not by boardrooms, but by a single night of rain and law. Mama Grace stood silently, her presence heavier than any officer's badge. She didn't need to shout. Her calm was thunder enough. "Mr. Cole," the court clerk said, stepping closer, "you may either accept temporary custodianship as stipulated," he pointed toward Jamal, who stiffened, "or contest it in front of the judge at dawn. But know this, the clock is not your ally. Midnight seals the matter." Darius's chest tightened. Midnight was less than an hour away. "Jamal," Vanessa hissed, turning her fury on him. "Don't even think of touching that letter. You're here to guard doors, not rule a billion-dollar house." Jamal met her eyes, then looked at Darius. He had never wanted power, but he remembered Mama Grace pressing bread into his hand years ago when his brother was locked up. "If you eat with dignity," she told him, "life will one day call you to sit at bigger tables." "I didn't ask for this," Jamal said quietly, "but maybe your father saw something none of you wanted to see." The words stung. Darius flinched as if struck. He turned to his mother, voice rough. "So you would rather hand everything to a guard than trust your own son?" Mama Grace shook her head. "I would rather hand everything to honesty than to arrogance. Blood makes you my son, but character makes you my heir." Silence fell again. The rain outside slowed, as though listening. Darius's fist clenched around the envelope. His pride screamed at him to tear it, to throw it in the fire and end this humiliation. But the image of his father's video kept replaying in his mind. "If you forget the chair your mother sits on," his father's words burned deeper than the officer's threats. At last, Darius slammed the envelope onto the desk. "Fine, fine." His voice cracked, filling the room. I'll acknowledge it. Temporary. Symbolic. But this ends tonight. Adeyemi stepped forward. Then you must sign, Mr. Cole, with your mother as witness. Darius grabbed the pen, scrawled his signature across the document, and shoved it back. There. Satisfied? Adeyemi placed the signed page into his folder with calm precision. Satisfied that you listened? Yes. Vanessa was shaking with rage. Darius, do you realize what you've done? You've handed your empire into the hands of a... She looked at Jamal with venom. Nobody. Mama Grace stepped forward, her voice low but sharp as a blade. A nobody is only a somebody you refuse to see. Be careful, Vanessa. The ground does not forget the feet that step on it. The court clerk nodded once. We'll notify the judge of compliance. The custodian clause stands. Review in 90 days unless withdrawn earlier. He tucked the envelope into his case. The officers followed him back toward the door. As their footsteps faded, the room seemed to exhale, but the air was heavy still. Darius turned to Jamal. Don't think this makes you my equal. You may have your name on a paper, but I still built this house. I still hold the reins. Jamal said nothing. His silence was steady, unshaken. Mama Grace walked slowly to the hibiscus by the window. She touched one of its rain-wet petals, red and trembling under the light. This flower is still alive, she said softly, but only because roots go deeper than storms. She turned and looked straight at her son. You think tonight is the storm? No, Darius. Tonight is only the wind before the storm. Her words struck the room like prophecy. And then the butler appeared again, pale and shaken. Sir, there's something else. Reporters are outside the gate. Someone leaked the story. Darius's blood ran cold. What? Cameras, the butler stammered. Microphones. They're shouting questions. About your mother. About eviction. About the trust. The house seemed to tremble with the echo of voices just beyond its walls. Darius's empire, his carefully polished image, was crumbling before his eyes. And midnight was still nearly 40 minutes away. If you've been following this story closely, pause for a moment. What would you have done in Darius's place tonight? Would you have humbled yourself before your mother or fought for pride? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget, if you're enjoying this story, hit that subscribe button, like the video, and share it with friends. Now let's see what happens when the storm outside breaks through the gates. The flashing lights outside painted the mansion's white walls in streaks of red and blue. Through the tall windows, the silhouettes of reporters pressed against the iron gates like restless shadows. Their voices carried across the wet lawn, words half lost in the storm. Is it true you kicked out your mother, Mr. Cole? Darius, how does it feel to lose control of your company? Mama Grace, can we hear your side of the story? Inside, the family portrait above the stairs seemed to watch with a mocking stillness, its painted smiles frozen while the house shook with tension. Vanessa stormed toward the window, pulling the curtains shut with a violent sweep. This is a nightmare, she hissed. Do you understand? If those cameras capture your mother inside this house with legal papers in her hand, everything we've built will rot. Our reputation, our contracts, the banks. Mama Grace cut in, her voice calm but cutting. Tell me, Vanessa, what have you built except distance between a son and his mother? Vanessa spun, fury blazing. I've built refinement, class, the kind of life where investors don't feel uncomfortable around market women with puff-puff oil on their wrappers. The words landed like a slap. Jamal stiffened. Adeyemi frowned. And Darius. For a moment, his lips parted as if to defend his wife. But then his eyes slid to his mother. Her face had not flinched. Only her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with the kind of pain that sits deep and silent. Darius's voice came low, nearly breaking. Enough, Vanessa. She turned on him. Enough? You're going to side with her now? After everything I've sacrificed to make you who you are, I made you respectable. I polished you for the world. Mama Grace shook her head gently. Respect is not polish, child. Respect is roots. Without roots, your polish is dust in the first rain. Outside, a chant began, reporters shouting Mama Grace's name, her story already growing wings. The butler hurried back in. Sir, one of the reporters claims to have documents. They say they've been tipped off about the custodian clause. They're threatening to broadcast live. Darius swore under his breath. He ran a hand through his hair, the composure of the billionaire cracking in front of everyone. Adeyemi spoke quietly, like a man who knew time was sand slipping fast. Mr. Cole, the longer you delay, the worse this becomes. Acknowledge your mother before the cameras do. Let the world see you stand beside her, not against her. That is the only rope left to pull you from this pit. Stand beside her? Vanessa spat. And throw away everything? But Darius wasn't listening to her anymore. He was thinking of shareholders, of boardrooms, of his father's calm eyes in that old video. He thought of the hibiscus, named after him, trembling with rain but still alive. At last, he looked at Jamal. If your name is on that custodian letter, then you walk with me. You'll face the press beside me. If this explodes, you'll carry some of the fire too. Jamal's voice was steady. I've carried worse fire, sir, but I won't lie for you. I'll stand with truth. Darius almost flinched. Then he nodded once, sharply, as if conceding to fate. Mother, he said, turning to Mama Grace, if I walk out there with you tonight, you must stand with me. No more secrets, no more hidden flash drives and clauses, just truth. Mama Grace's gaze softened, though her spine remained straight. Truth is all I ever wanted you to carry, my son. They walked together toward the grand double doors, the billionaire, his mother, and the guard who had suddenly become custodian. Vanessa stood back, her face twisted with disbelief, muttering under her breath, "He's destroying everything." As the butler opened the doors, the storm air rushed in, cool and wet. Reporters surged forward, cameras flashing, voices rising like a wave. And there, under the portico lights, Mama Grace stepped forward first. Her wrapper was faded, her scarf simple, yet she stood taller than the billion-dollar mansion behind her. "My name is Grace Cole," she said, her voice carrying steady through the storm. "And tonight, my son forgot that riches without respect are poverty in disguise." The crowd erupted. Microphones shot forward. Questions rained. Darius stepped beside her, jaw clenched, every inch of him caught between pride and survival. The cameras flashed, capturing the image that would circle the world before dawn. Billionaire son and the mother he had cast out, now side by side. But as the questions grew louder, one reporter shouted above the rest, "Mr. Cole, is it true the custodian clause makes your head of security the legal controller of your empire?" Gasps rippled. Cameras zoomed in. Darius froze. Jamal's name was already spreading on the reporters' tongues. Vanessa's voice, sharp and desperate, sliced through the night from behind them. "Yes, it's true. My husband's empire has been handed to a guard, because of this woman's scheming." The crowd roared. Flashes lit the sky, and the storm outside finally broke into heavy rain again. And Mama Grace, her face calm against the flood of questions, looked at her son and whispered so only he could hear, "The storm has only begun." The rain fell harder now, sheets of silver cutting across the estate gates as the crowd pressed closer. Reporters raised umbrellas and cameras at the same time, their voices clashing like thunder. "Mr. Cole, will you confirm Jamal Okoye is now custodian of Cole Urban Holdings?" "Mrs. Cole, is it true you orchestrated your mother-in-law's eviction?" "Mama Grace, do you feel vindicated tonight?" Microphones nearly touched their faces. Flashbulbs lit the driveway like lightning. Darius lifted a hand, demanding silence, but the noise only swelled. His control, the thing he had spent his entire life cultivating, was slipping through his fingers like rainwater. His empire wasn't in a boardroom anymore. It was in the street, in the mouths of reporters, in the eyes of a mother who would not bend. Vanessa broke first. She pushed past Darius and Mama Grace, stepping into the flash of cameras with her arms flung wide. "Yes, it's true," she shouted. "This house, this empire, everything is under threat because of a clause hidden by a dead man and exploited by a bitter old woman." Gasps cut through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. Mama Grace's face remained calm, but her words carried like a blade. "I am not bitter," she said. "I am simply not silent." The crowd erupted, chanting her name now. "Mama Grace! Mama Grace!" as if she were the true heir, the real figure of dignity. Darius felt a hollow pit opening inside him. His wife's outburst was gasoline on the fire, and his mother's calm only made the cameras hungrier. He turned to Jamal, whose shoulders were squared, whose uniform was damp but steady. "This ends tonight," Darius muttered under the roar. "We take control of the narrative before dawn." "How?" Jamal asked evenly. "By showing unity," Darius said through gritted teeth. "The cameras want division. We give them family. A staged reconciliation. That buys us time." Mama Grace turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Staged reconciliation is not reconciliation. You want to act for cameras. I want you to kneel before the truth." Her words hit him harder than the chants. For the first time, the billionaire son's composure cracked in full view of the world. His hand shook at his side, his eyes burned, not with tears, but with a fury tangled in shame. The reporters sensed blood. "Mr. Cole, are you prepared to kneel before your mother?" The question spread through the crowd like fire on dry grass. Darius's jaw locked. Kneel. Before cameras? Before rivals? Shareholders? The world? He could see the headline in his mind already. Billionaire son bows to mother. His empire might never recover from that image. But then his father's voice returned, steady and unshaken, from the video on that flash drive. "Sit down, listen, make it right. If you do that, when the house returns to you, it will not be ashamed of you." The rain beat harder, the chants grew louder, and Mama Grace stood before him, still as stone, her presence bigger than wealth, bigger than gates, bigger than pride. Darius's chest heaved. He looked at Vanessa, whose face was twisted with anger and fear. He looked at Jamal, who watched him with an expression he couldn't read, part loyalty, part judgment. Then he looked back at his mother. Slowly, painfully, Darius lowered himself. The crowd gasped. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted his name. Vanessa screamed his. But he didn't stop. On the wet stone steps of his billion-dollar mansion, Darius Cole bent his knees until he was kneeling before Mama Grace. The storm thundered overhead. The world froze in shock. Mama Grace placed her hand gently on his bowed head. Her voice, soft but steady, carried over the storm and the chaos. "Better a son who kneels in truth than a king who stands in lies." The cameras caught it all. The billionaire had knelt. And as the clock inside the mansion ticked toward 11:40 p.m., a quiet vibration buzzed in Adeyemi's pocket. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened. "The banks have escalated," he said urgently. "They're freezing executive powers until morning. Jamal's name is officially listed as custodian effective midnight." The storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break inside Darius's empire. By dawn, Atlanta was already awake. The storm had broken, but its echo lingered in the headlines that screamed from every newsstand, every television, every glowing phone screen. Billionaire kneels before mother in midnight showdown. Custodian guard takes control of 12B Empire. Family feud rocks, Cole Urban Holdings. Footage of Darius kneeling in the rain played on repeat across major networks. Mama Grace's calm hand resting on his head was replayed in slow motion, her words quoted in bold letters. "Better a son who kneels in truth than a king who stands in lies." On social media, hashtags trended worldwide. Mama Grace, custodian clause, billionaire kneels. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was brittle, like glass stretched thin. Vanessa sat at the breakfast table, still in last night's cream dress, makeup smudged, her phone buzzing nonstop with texts from friends, journalists, and lawyers. She scrolled furiously, each headline twisting her face tighter. "Do you see this?" she snapped at Darius. "You're a global meme, a joke. The kneeling king. Do you know how investors see weakness? Like blood in the water?" Darius stood at the window, unshaven, tie loose, staring at the hibiscus by the kitchen. Its petals glowed red in the pale morning light, still trembling but alive. He had hardly slept. Images of his father's video, his mother's voice, and the flash of cameras haunted him. "I didn't kneel for them," he said quietly. "I knelt for her." Vanessa slammed her phone down. "And in doing so, you've given away your empire. Do you even understand? Jamal, your guard, is listed as custodian. The banks have frozen you out. Your board is panicking. This family is about to lose everything." At that moment, Jamal entered, wearing a fresh uniform but looking uneasy with the weight on his shoulders. Adeyemi followed, holding a stack of printed documents. "Mr. Cole," Adeyemi said calmly, "as of midnight, Jamal is custodian of Cole Urban Holdings. The banks have acknowledged it. The board will convene in 72 hours for an emergency session. Until then, Jamal holds executive authority. Vanessa laughed bitterly. A guard running a billion-dollar company. This is insanity. Jamal's voice was steady, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor. I didn't ask for this, but your father saw fit to trust me, and your mother signed the clause. For 90 days, I am bound to act in the best interest of this family and the company. Darius turned at last, his eyes tired but sharp. And what do you intend to do with that power, Jamal? Jamal hesitated. He looked at Mama Grace, who had just entered the room with a tray of tea. She placed it gently on the table, as if the chaos of headlines and banks meant nothing compared to serving morning tea. What I intend, Jamal said finally, is to bring honesty back into this house. The world is watching. They want to see if this empire is built on respect or pride. If you fight me, Mr. Cole, you'll lose both your name and your wealth. But if you stand with me, even under this clause, you may yet save both. Silence fell. The only sound was the clink of Mama Grace pouring tea into cups. Vanessa broke first, her voice shrill. This is absurd. Darius, are you seriously going to let a street boy lecture you in your own house? Mama Grace's eyes lifted. The street teaches what marble floors forget. Do not despise lessons because of the mouth they come from. Darius looked between his wife, his mother, and Jamal. His empire, his pride, his legacy. They were all balancing on a blade. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. If I stand with you, Jamal, if I let this charade play out, what happens when the 90 days end? Jamal met his gaze squarely. That depends on whether you prove worthy of holding the house your father built. Adeyemi set the documents on the table. And it begins immediately. Reporters are outside demanding a press statement. Shareholders want clarity before the market opens. Gentlemen, Mama Grace, what happens in the next 2 hours will decide whether Cole Urban Holdings rises stronger or collapses entirely. Vanessa's phone buzzed again. She glanced at the screen and went pale. Darius. It's worse. Rival companies are circling. One just filed for an injunction to freeze one of your construction projects downtown. If we don't respond today, they'll eat you alive. Darius clenched his fists. For the first time in years, he felt powerless in his own house. But then Mama Grace set a cup of tea in front of him, her hand steady. Drink, she said softly. Storms are not fought by shouting at the clouds. They are survived by standing with those who carry umbrellas. Her calm cut through the chaos like sunlight through rain. Darius exhaled slowly. Fine. Jamal, Adeyemi, we stand together. But if this goes wrong, understand, this house will not forgive you. Jamal nodded once. Then let's make sure it doesn't go wrong. And as the family gathered around the table, the weight of cameras, banks, and rivals pressing against the gates, the city was already writing the next headline. The guard, the mother, and the billionaire. A new era for Cole Urban Holdings. The battle had shifted. Pride was no longer the enemy. The enemy was time. And Midnight's storm had only been the beginning. The Cole estate had turned into a fortress under siege. Reporters swarmed the gates, drones hovered overhead, and rival executives sent spies in the form of concerned shareholders. By 9 a.m., the board of Cole Urban Holdings was demanding a press statement. The markets were wobbling, and every second of silence felt like an admission of guilt. Inside the mansion, the grand hall had been transformed into a makeshift press room. A podium stood at the center, flanked by the family portrait and the American and Nigerian flags. Rows of cameras and microphones were already being tested by reporters who had been let inside under strict security. Vanessa paced the marble floor like a trapped lioness, her heels clicking sharp. This is insane. We're letting strangers into our home, into our lives? Darius, this makes us look desperate. Mama Grace, sitting calmly in an armchair near the hibiscus window, spoke without raising her voice. Better to look desperate and honest than rich and blind. If you hide from the truth will find you anyway. Darius adjusted his tie, his face pale but determined. He hadn't slept, but his eyes carried the weight of a man facing a crossroads. Jamal stood beside him, an unlikely custodian in his pressed uniform, shoulders squared as though holding up the house itself. Adeyemi shuffled papers at the podium, his lawyers calm, masking the urgency. "The press will focus on three things," he said briskly. 1. The eviction of your mother. 2. The activation of the custodian clause. And 3. The stability of the company. If we control those narratives, the market will stabilize." "And if we don't?" Darius asked. "Then by tomorrow," Adeyemi said without hesitation, "Cole Urban Holdings may no longer be yours." Silence. Even Vanessa stopped pacing. The butler stepped in nervously. "Sir, the press is ready." Darius's stomach tightened. His father's words echoed once more in his head. "If you forget the chair your mother sits on—" He nodded. "Let's do this." The grand doors opened, and the press surged inside like a tide of noise and light. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. The room buzzed like a hive. Darius stepped to the podium, Jamal on one side, Mama Grace on the other. The image was striking. Billionaire, mother, and security guard standing together beneath the family portrait. "Ladies and gentlemen," Darius began, his voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. "What you witnessed last night was not a scandal. It was a reckoning. A reckoning for me, for my family, and for this company." The room hushed. Reporters leaned in. "I made the mistake of forgetting where I came from," Darius continued. "I forgot the prayers and sacrifices of the woman who raised me. I forgot that wealth without respect is poverty in disguise. And for that I publicly ask forgiveness from my mother, Mama Grace." Gasps rippled through the press. Mama Grace inclined her head slightly, her eyes soft but unreadable. "But let me be clear," Darius pressed on. "This company is strong. Our foundations are stronger than any storm. The custodian clause activated not to destroy us, but to remind us of who we are. Jamal Okoye, who has served this house with loyalty, now holds that role. And together we will protect this company not as enemies but as family." Reporters exploded with questions. "Mr. Cole, are you saying you accept Jamal's authority? Mama Grace, do you believe your son is truly repentant? Jamal, how does it feel to control billions overnight?" Jamal stepped forward, his voice firm. "It feels heavy, but it feels right. I'm not here to take what isn't mine. I'm here to make sure what was built with sacrifice does not crumble with pride. For 90 days, I'll do my duty. After that, the board and this family will decide the future." The room buzzed again, but now there was a murmur of respect threading through it. Mama Grace rose slowly, and without a microphone, her words carried over the crowd. "My husband planted this empire with honesty. My son watered it with ambition. But only if both hands work together, honesty and ambition, will this house stand. Let the world write what it wants. Let the banks count what they will. What matters is that a mother's chair is never forgotten in her son's house." The press erupted in applause, cameras flashing like lightning. For a moment, the storm seemed to shift. But then, Vanessa. She strode to the podium, snatching the microphone with trembling hands. "Enough of this performance," she shouted, her voice cutting through the applause. "You all cheer for this woman and her street guard as if they built this empire. But where were they when I was standing by Darius at every investor dinner? Where were they when I kept his scandals buried, when I fought to polish his name into something the world could respect? And now you all think you can erase me with your tears and theatrics?" The crowd gasped. Darius tried to reach for her, but she shoved his hand away. Her face was flushed, her eyes wild. "Fine. If you want truth, here it is. Darius, tell them. Tell the world about the offshore accounts, about the money you hid in shell companies under false names. Tell them how much of your empire was built not just on sweat and prayer, but on shadows." The room exploded. Reporters shouted over each other, cameras flashed in a frenzy. The butler dropped his tray in shock, teacups shattering on the marble floor. Darius's face went white. Adeyemi froze. Jamal's fists clenched. Mama Grace closed her eyes, her calm unbroken, but her silence heavy. The press had smelled blood before. Now they had it. The storm outside had nothing on the storm inside this house. And as the headlines began writing themselves in real time, one truth became clear. The greatest threat to Darius was no longer his mother. It was his wife. Viewers, what do you think of Vanessa's shocking revelation? Was she right to expose her husband, or has she crossed a line that no wife should? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you're caught up in this storm, don't forget to like this video, subscribe,
The press conference
and share it with your
dissolved into
friends.
chaos.
Reporters shouted over one another, flashes fired endlessly, and microphones thrust forward like spears. Mr. Cole, is it true you hid funds offshore? Vanessa, do you have proof of these claims? Jamal, as custodian, will you initiate an investigation? The questions swarmed like bees, and the mansion's grand hall felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. Darius gripped the podium, his face pale but jaw hard. Enough, he roared, the sound echoing off the marble walls. The crowd stilled slightly, but cameras stayed locked on him. These accusations are the words of a bitter woman trying to destroy her husband in front of the world. Vanessa, you disgrace yourself and this family. Vanessa's laugh was sharp, bitter, unhinged. Disgrace? No, Darius. Disgrace is kneeling in front of cameras while hiding dirty money. You think I don't know? I've seen the files. I've seen the accounts. You never trusted me, but you were careless enough to leave trails. Reporters surged forward. Do you have the documents? Can you share them with the press? Vanessa smirked, relishing the moment. She reached into her purse and pulled out a slim USB stick, holding it aloft like a weapon. Right here, the truth you all are so desperate for. Proof that this empire is not as clean as it looks. Gasps rippled through the room. Adeyemi's face drained of color. Darius's hands tightened on the podium until his knuckles whitened. But then, Jamal. He stepped forward, his voice calm but commanding. Mrs. Cole, if you truly have evidence, then hand it to me. I am the custodian. It is my duty to investigate, not to bury, not to exploit, but to ensure honesty. The cameras swung toward him. For a moment, he didn't look like a guard. He looked like a leader. Vanessa sneered. Oh, how convenient. The street boy elevated to watchdog. Do you really think anyone will believe you? You're a pawn, Jamal, a pawn in her game. She jabbed a finger toward Mama Grace, who sat quietly in her chair, hands folded, her face unreadable. This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? To strip my husband, to humiliate us, to put your little servant in charge. The room buzzed again. All eyes turned to Mama Grace. She stood slowly, the weight of years in her frame but dignity in every step. When she spoke, her voice was soft, yet it carried over the chaos. Child, she said to Vanessa, power is not kept by shouting, nor respect by insults. You speak of pawns, but even a pawn can reach the end of the board and become a queen. Do not despise what you cannot control. The hall fell quiet. Even the reporters leaned in, captivated. Darius turned to Vanessa, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. You would destroy me? In front of the world? After everything I gave you? You gave me cages disguised as jewels, she spat. You gave me a mansion with no love. You chose your pride over me every day, and now I'll choose my freedom over you. She tossed the USB toward the press pool. A reporter caught it with fumbling hands. Cameras zoomed in, shouts erupted. Proof! We have proof! Security surged forward, trying to contain the chaos, but it was too late. The story was out. Darius's empire was no longer in his hands. It was in the hands of strangers, of cameras, of whispers that would become headlines by nightfall. He turned back to his mother, desperation flickering in his eyes. You see what she's done? This is your fault, Ma. If you hadn't forced this circus, she wouldn't have... Mama Grace raised her hand gently, silencing him. No, my son. This is not my storm. This is yours. And only truth will calm it. Jamal placed a steady hand on Darius's shoulder. Sir, the board will demand answers. Investigations will come, whether you like it or not. You can fight and fall, or you can face it and maybe rise again. Darius looked around, at the cameras, at the reporters, at Vanessa, whose face was alight with vengeance. He felt the weight of his father's words pressing like chains. Sit down, listen, make it right. But pride warred with fear inside him. And as the press surged forward again, shouting questions, one officer stepped into the hall, his badge glinting. Mr. Darius Cole, he said, his voice official, a judge has ordered immediate review of your financials. You are required to present yourself downtown within the hour. The room exploded. Vanessa smiled like a woman who had just set fire to her prison. Mama Grace bowed her head in silent prayer, and Darius, once the untouchable billionaire, now stood trembling at the edge of ruin. The storm outside had ended, but the storm inside his empire had only just begun. The convoy of black SUVs cut through downtown like shadows on wheels. Police motorcycles cleared the way, sirens low but steady, as if reminding the city to watch. Reporters followed in a frenzy, cameras pressed against windows, broadcasting every second live. Inside one of the vehicles sat Darius Cole, flanked by lawyers who whispered strategy in hushed tones he barely heard. His hands, once steady enough to sign billion-dollar contracts, trembled in his lap. He stared out at the glass towers rising above Atlanta, towers he had built, towers now whispering about his fall. Beside him, Mama Grace sat with her small leather bag clutched in her lap, her presence calm as a hymn. She wore the same cardigan and scarf, unchanged by wealth or scandal. She glanced at her son once, her voice soft but cutting through the silence. "Rain washes many things, my son, but it cannot wash shame unless you let truth do the scrubbing." Darius shut his eyes. "Ma, if those files are real, if the world sees them, everything I've built will collapse." "No," she said gently. "If it was built wrongly, it was already collapsing. The files only pull away the curtain." Jamal sat across from them, posture upright despite the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. "Mr. Cole," he said, "you still have a chance. If you face this with humility, the people might forgive. If you fight, they'll bury you." The car slowed before the courthouse, where a sea of reporters, protesters, and curious onlookers had gathered. Signs waved, "Justice for Mama Grace. No one above truth. Cole must answer." As they stepped out, flashes exploded. Shouts pierced the air. "Mama Grace, do you stand by your son? Darius, will you resign? Jamal, how does it feel to hold more power than a billionaire?" Mama Grace did not answer. She walked with slow dignity, her cane tapping softly against the stone steps. Darius followed, his shoulders hunched, his empire unraveling with every click of a camera. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. The judge, a stern woman with sharp eyes, presided over the emergency hearing. The USB Vanessa had thrown was already plugged into a court computer. Screens flickered with spreadsheets, shell company names, and account transfers. The courtroom gasped. Darius's lawyers scrambled, objecting, claiming context, but the judge silenced them with a raised hand. "Mr. Cole, these records are damning. Funds hidden offshore, shell entities tied to your name. Do you deny these accounts exist?" Darius's throat tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it. For once in his life, words failed him. The judge turned. "Mr. Okoye, as custodian, do you have a recommendation for the court?" Every eye turned to Jamal. He rose slowly, the weight of history pressing on his shoulders. He spoke with the steadiness of a man who had swept streets, guarded doors, and now held an empire. "My recommendation," he said, "is that Mr. Cole remain as face of the company, but under watch. That every account be opened, every dollar traced, every deal reviewed. Not to destroy what was built, but to clean it. Because a house can survive cracks in its walls, but it cannot survive rot in its foundation." The judge studied him, then nodded. "So ordered. Until further notice, Cole Urban Holdings will operate under custodian oversight. This court will appoint auditors immediately." Reporters rushed out to file headlines. "Guard saves billionaire's empire, but at a cost." Darius sat heavily, his chest heaving. He turned slowly toward his mother, his voice breaking. "Ma, I thought building towers would make me untouchable, but tonight I've lost everything." Mama Grace reached across, laying her wrinkled hand over his. "No, my son. Tonight you have lost your pride. Everything else can be rebuilt, but only if you start with respect." Tears welled in his eyes. For the first time in decades, Darius let them fall. Vanessa, watching from across the room, stood with arms crossed, her face tight with fury. She had struck her blow, but she saw now that it had not freed her. It had only chained her name to scandal. The crowd looked at Mama Grace with reverence, at Jamal with respect, but at her with contempt. Later, as they stepped back out into the flashing storm of cameras, Mama Grace led the way down the courthouse steps. Darius followed, Not as a billionaire commanding an empire, but as a son walking behind his mother's strength. And the cameras captured the moment the world would remember. Mama Grace, head held high, walking into history as the woman who brought a billionaire to his knees, not with force, not with power, but with truth. The crowd chanted her name again. Mama Grace! Mama Grace! And as the city roared, Darius whispered to himself, barely audible, I regret ever turning you away. Mama Grace heard. She smiled faintly, her eyes glistening, and replied, Regret is good, my son, if it turns into repentance. The storm had ended, but its lessons would echo forever. Viewers, after everything that happened, do you believe Darius truly learned his lesson? Could you ever forgive a child who cast out their own mother? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you followed Mama Grace's journey, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and share it so more people can reflect on this powerful story.